It's May 7th, 2026, and right now, as you're watching this, more than 100 U.S. military aircraft are orbiting the skies above and around the Middle East, and specifically the Strait of Hormuz. The USS carrier strike groups are on station, and U.S. destroyers are holding the line at the entrance to the Persian Gulf. 24 hours ago, American warships and combat aircraft put 6 Iranian fastboats at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. And yet, the ceasefire technically holds for now, even though just a few days ago, Iran went ahead and launched a barrage of missiles at UAE. But here's what the IRGC, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the hardline paramilitary force that answers directly to the Supreme Leader Inner Circle, whoever that may be at this point. Here's what they had to say. The most consequential 48 hours in this entire conflict just concluded with something that nobody in the mainstream media is framing correctly. Iran's mullahs, the same leadership that told the world just days ago that they have not even begun yet, are right now sitting in Tehran reviewing a one-page memorandum drafted by the United States, passed through Pakistani mediators, that demands they hand over their entire stockpile of highly enriched uranium, accept a 15-year moratorium on enrichment, and open the Strait of Hormuz unconditionally. And the reason they are reviewing it instead of rejecting it outright, the reason the IRGC's bravado about not having begun yet has quietly disappeared from the headlines, is sitting at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. 6 Iranian fast attack boats gone, eliminated by U.S. Army Apache helicopters and Navy Seahawk crews in a matter of minutes during Operation Project Freedom. And that combined with 68 days of the most comprehensive military degradation of a regional power since the Gulf War is what brought us to this moment. So let's break down exactly what happened, what it means, and why the next 48 hours may close this chapter of history permanently. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagar Ghalib stood up in Tehran and declared, "We have not even begun yet." That's the rhetoric. So let's talk about what's actually happening on the water, even though they're saying they haven't begun yet. In the past 24 hours, President Trump directed the U.S. Navy to pause Project Freedom, the armed escort mission designed to shepherd stranded commercial vessels through the strait and out of the Persian Gulf. And here's the 2 Truth Social posts you need to know about. He said, based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, the tremendous military success we have had during the campaign against the country of Iran, and additionally, the fact that great progress has been made toward a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran. We have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force and affect Project Freedom, the movement of ships through the strait will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalized and signed. And then just an hour ago, from the time of this video being produced, President Trump said this: assuming Iran agrees to give what has been agreed to, which is perhaps a big assumption, the already legendary Epic Fury will be at an end and the highly effective blockade will allow the Hormuz Strait to open to all, including Iran. If they don't agree, the bombing starts, and it will be sadly at a much higher level and intensity than it was before. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So having the almost 200 Air Force fighters and bombers at Middle East bases in the region, they could light this back off if that gladiator thumbs down is given, if Iran doesn't agree to the deal. But it looks like great progress. At least giving the enemy an off-ramp, which is a key part of the art of war. Let them save face so they feel like they're walking away from a position of strength. So this might create a comprehensive deal. And it's also said that Pakistan obviously wants this deal to happen as well. Mainstream media coverage is glossing over a lot of things, though. U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports is still in full effect, while the media right now is trying to say, oh, the U.S. has completely pulled out. The U.S. is not projecting strength. Well, quite the opposite is true, my friend. With Iranian ports still having their ships pushed back in, and I'm saying ships for the record, the economic squeeze on Tehran has not paused for a second, not even 1 second. And the airborne umbrella protecting global shipping. This is happening right now, backed up by the 82nd Airborne. 82nd Airborne is using AI. They're using intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to create what Secretary of War Pete Hegseth called a red, white, and blue dome over top of the Middle East and over top of Iran itself. That's up. That's active. led by the 82nd Airborne, and Iran says, well, we haven't even begun yet. Well, I would say 6 of your fast attack boats did begin, and now they're at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. So I think you're racking up a tab without even having begun, which is odd. But what actually triggered this pause? What did U.S. forces do 24 hours before Trump made this call? The full operational breakdown starts right now. Operation Epic Fury, the major combat phase that the U.S. and Israel launched back on February 28th, had already achieved its core objectives, including degrading Iran's air defenses, targeting IRGC command and control, infrastructure, plus leadership, destroying their navy, and destroying their ability to produce ballistic missiles and drones, destroying their military capacity to build those things, also take down their ability to build a nuclear weapon. That's pretty much the primary objective. But on May 4th, the U.S. launched Project Freedom. That was that new armed escort operation to physically guide stranded commercial ships through a southern lane running close to Omani territorial waters outside Iranian control. But within hours, Iran responded, of course, with their Mosquito fleet. CENTCOM U.S. Central Command, the combatant command responsible to the Middle East, confirmed that Iran launched what Admiral Brad Cooper described as multiple cruise missiles, drones, and small boats targeting both U.S. Navy ships and commercial vessels. U.S. forces responded decisively. CENTCOM confirmed that 6 Iranian small boats were eliminated by Apaches and Seahawk helicopters. President Trump cited that there were 7. So there were 6 or 7 of these boats that were taken down. Iranian state media denied their boats were sunk. Of course, they said they were tourist boats. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of tourism going on in the Strait of Hormuz right now. Maybe the boats were just out there looking for the kamikaze dolphins, which the IRGC also claims they have. I mean, that's better than sharks with freaking laser beams at this point. And then, simultaneously, Iran launched drone and missile strikes on UAE oil refineries for 2 days in a row. The United Arab Emirates, one of the key Gulf partners for the U.S., confirmed the attack. And then the British military separately reported 2 cargo vessels were ablaze off the coast of UAE, and a third was hit by an unknown projectile in the strait itself. A South Korean-operated bolt carrier caught fire after an explosion. Seoul confirmed the vessel will be towed for repairs, with all 24 crew members accounted for. The full kinetic picture here, though, that's what the 24 hours was leading up to Trump's pause. That just happened this morning. That's what it actually looked like on the water. And so it's also why when you hear Iran say we have not even begun, the correct response is your boats are on the seafloor of the Persian Gulf. So maybe let's start there and let's acknowledge that you did actually begin. Now your boats are going to be beautiful reefs at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. So Iran's public posture stays defiant. Their private proposal stays desperate because the gap between what they say and what they're actually doing is where we'll find the truth. Trend's supposed 14-point peace proposal that was delivered through Pakistan on April 30th reads like it was written by someone who thinks they won the war completely and they don't have to negotiate at all, because remember, the IRGC and the leadership are so insulated from everything. They've taken all the treasure from their entire country and propped themselves up with golden palaces and golden crappers. Part of that peace proposal demands a full U.S. military withdrawal from the region, the lifting of the American naval blockade, unfreezing all of Iranians' overseas assets, war reparations paid to Iran, an end to all military operations, including in Lebanon, and creation of a brand new international control mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz. It's not a peace offer. It's basically a ransom note from the guy who's already in prison. The U.S. is completely aware that Iran is trying to tap along the world again with that supposed peace proposal. But here's a shock value number for you. Supposedly, there's 400-plus kilog of highly enriched uranium that Iran has accumulated, the kind refined to levels approaching weapons grade. That's according to the UN's own nuclear watchdog, the IAEA. That is enough fiscal material to potentially produce multiple nuclear devices if it's refined further. Washington saying this is a non-negotiable, that stockpile has to go. All of it. Iran's response, nuclear enrichment, is a sovereign right. And that gap right there is the center of gravity of the entire conflict that we're watching unfold. And here's the next shock value number, 230 plus. That is the number of loaded oil tankers that were confirmed anchored and waiting inside the Persian Gulf at the peak of the standoff. Unable to move, cargo stuck, their owners hemorrhaging costs. Iran's leverage is real, but is leverage that is also strangling China, strangling the Gulf states, strangling their European partners. We know that the UK and France obviously have ties with Iran. They're strangling global trade partners who are now quietly, very quietly, likely pushing Tehran toward a deal. Iran Foreign Minister Iraqi currently is in Beijing, lobbying for Chinese support, posted on X that Project Freedom is Project Deadlock. That would be more compelling if Rubio hadn't responded by urging China directly to tell Iraqi that continued attacks in the Strait make everyone's economic situation worse, including China's, because Beijing imports a significant share of their oil through Hormuz. They're not neutral bystanders here in this situation. So you've seen the threats from Iran. Now, let's meet the American hardware that is physically holding the line in Iran with the blockade still in full force. That's American iron, and it's focused on the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, guided missile destroyers that are the Navy's workhorse. When it comes to this actual blockade itself, Arleigh Burke-class is 509 FT of layered lethality. Its primary weapon system is the Mk-41 Vertical Launch System, the VLS, carrying up to 96 missiles in a standard configuration. That load can include Standard Missile SM-6 for long-range air-surface engagements, evolved Sea Sparrow missiles for close and air defense work, and Tomahawk cruise missiles for land strikes. One ship, 96 deadly rounds, all loaded onto that one ship itself. Then for the close-end fight against the Iranian fast boats and low-flying drones, the exact threat profile seen in the Strait of Hormuz over the last 48 hours, those ships actually carry a 5-in gun as well, called the Mk-45, that's capable of putting precisely aimed naval gunfire on surface targets at ranges that can go out to 10 mi, which is just wild. And then you add in the air assault force that's right there. That includes the A-10. The A-10 is likely the main one leading the charge that would take on those Iranian fast boats should they come again and try to strike any commercial shipping or Navy vessels. The key highlight of that is the 30 million cannon on that thing. Also, the ability of the A-10 to carry rocket pods. Rocket pods guided by lasers, highly effective going up against those fast attack boats. That to me is the #1 fast attack boat drone killing platform. Even though the Air Force always tries to get rid of it, it seems to always come back in, and everybody says, oh wait, we need the A-10. We need to put at the forefront of this conflict, especially in the Strait of Hormuz. So join me in saving the A-10. Comment below. Let's save the A-10. Again, the #1 platform to take down drones and take down fast attack boats in this case. Also the AH-64 Apache. Basically a fighter jet with a big rotor on top, but you basically have taken a fighter jet and turned it into a helicopter. It's the perfect combination. It's the love child of fighter jets and helicopters at this point. Rocket systems on that. A massive cannon in the front that actually tracks the gunner's head, so the gunner can see symbology over what they want to shoot. Squeeze the trigger and unleash rounds onto targets, fast attack craft, and especially drones. That's a great drone killing platform. You team that up with the A-10, and then you basically got a new scene in Step Brothers. But at this point, instead of them both, they're capable of simultaneously tracking hundreds of contacts and queuing weapons automatically, tying into Link 16, passing information about where the drones could be, where the different fast attack boats could be, to A-10s, to AH-64s, to F-15, and to F-18s that will be up above as part of the drone killing force. You can't hide those fast attack boats from the sensor suite. The sensor suite is insane, and you can't outmaneuver it. You basically can't hide from it at all. It's definitely the Stage 5 clingers of naval radars. Jeremy, you're amazing. Oh God, I think you're amazing. Oh my God. Don't ever leave me. Ever. Good. So you've got close to 200 aircraft overhead in the Persian Gulf area, ready to go should things kick back off again. ISR is a big part of this intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Because Iran's IRGC Navy, they rely on speed and they rely on deceptive tactics, where they try to hide these fast attack boats and then roll in with a disorienting swarm to try to overwhelm a single target against a carrier strike group. With embarked aviation, so think about the F-18. You've got the E and the F. The F is the two-seater. That one is a strike platform, with the E platform being more of the air superiority platform. So now you've got this massive package to take on these IRGC fast attack boats. So the hardware from America is dominating the water, but the real game right now is playing out in Beijing, Islamabad, and in the Oval Office of the United States. The next 72 hours may force a choice that reshapes the Middle East for generations. So from a 40 chess strategic analysis section, Iran's military has been totally dominated. Their navy, their air force, their fleet, they could only launch 6 fast attack craft. Now that's not nothing, but it does show that their ability to do anything militarily has been severely degraded. And now they're going to rely on that proxy force to go in and try to wreak chaos. But here's the deal. If this thing kicks back off, everything is on the table. And it will start with a suppression of enemy air defenses, where F-22s and F-35s roll in, and will completely obliterate whatever Iran has been able to get back out into the front lines for their surface-to-air missile systems. But likely Iran has updated some of those. President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social on Tuesday that Project Freedom, the operation to open the Strait of Hormuz, was temporarily paused as great progress has been made toward a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran. Trump wrote, based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, the tremendous military success that we have had during the campaign against the country of Iran, and additionally the fact that great progress has been made toward a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran, we have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force in effect, Project Freedom will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalized and signed. Read that statement one more time carefully. The blockade remains in full force and effect. This is not a pause in American pressure. This is not a retreat. This is the United States saying to Iran, we have already destroyed your navy. We have already eliminated your fast attack boats on day 1 of Project Freedom. We have already degraded your air defenses and ballistic missile production and nuclear enrichment infrastructure, and we are giving you a narrow window to accept terms before we resume at a significantly higher level of intensity. That is not negotiating from weakness. That is negotiating from the most dominant military position the U.S. has occupied in the Middle East since 2003. Trump followed up with a second Truth Social post on Wednesday stating, assuming Iran agrees to give what has been agreed to, which is perhaps a big assumption, the already legendary Epic Fury will be at an end, and the highly effective blockade will allow the Hormuz Strait to be open to all, including Iran. If they don't agree, the bombing starts, and it will be sadly at a much higher level in intensity than it was before. A much higher level and intensity than before. Let that land. Operation Epic Fury, launched February 28th, destroyed Iran's entire conventional navy, eliminated IRGC command and control infrastructure, targeted leadership, degraded ballistic missile and drone production facilities, and struck nuclear enrichment sites with precision munitions. And Trump is saying publicly on record that if this deal collapses, what comes next makes that look restrained. That is not rhetoric. That is a commander-in-chief describing a military option that 200-plus aircraft currently orbiting the Middle East are positioned to execute within hours of a thumbs-down decision. The United States and Iran are moving closer to an agreement on a short memorandum to end the Iran war. A regional source familiar with the negotiations told CNN. Key points include both countries lifting their respective blockades on the Strait of Hormuz. According to Axios, the lifting of the blockades would come in exchange for a U.S. removal of sanctions and an Iranian commitment to a 15-year moratorium on uranium enrichment. Iran would additionally agree to transfer its stockpile of highly enriched uranium outside of its borders potentially to the U.S. A 15-year moratorium on enrichment, transfer of the entire highly enriched uranium stockpile out of Iran potentially to American custody, and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz to all shipping without Iranian tolling, harassment, or control. 3 months ago, the Iranian regime would have called those terms a declaration of war. Today, they're reviewing them through Pakistani mediators. That gap between then and now is the distance that 67 days of Operation Epic Fury traveled, one strike package at a time. Washington wants Tehran to give up its stockpile of more than 400 kilos of highly enriched uranium, which the United States says could be used to make a bomb. Iranian media reported that Tehran's 14-point proposal includes withdrawing U.S. forces from nearby areas, lifting the blockade, releasing frozen assets, paying compensation, lifting sanctions, ending the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, and creating a new control mechanism for the Strait, Iran's 14-point proposal. I went through this carefully, and I want to be honest with you about what it actually is. It demands a full U.S. military withdrawal from the region, the lifting of the American naval blockade, the unfreezing of all Iranian overseas assets, war reparations paid to Iran, and a new Iranian-administered control mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz. Other words, Iran wants to be paid for losing the war and then handed back control of the choke point it lost the war over. That is not a peace offer. That is the negotiating position of a regime that is so internally insulated from reality by the IRGC's information control that it genuinely does not understand the position it is in. And Washington's response to it was to produce a one-page memorandum that cuts through 14 points of fantasy and establishes the actual American red lines in terms that leave no room for creative interpretation. Across 67 days of Operation Epic Fury is the only way to understand why Iran is reviewing a one-page memorandum instead of laughing at it. And then we need to talk about the strategic picture of what happens in the next 48 hours. Because the gap between a deal and a resumption of bombing at higher intensity than before has never been narrower than it is right now on May 6, 2026. And the details of that gap matter enormously. Start with the naval backbone of the blockade, because while the media has been focused on the fast attack boats and the Apache engagements, the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers are the platforms that have been physically enforcing the economic stranglehold on Iran that brought the regime to this point. War Secretary Pete Hegseth said on Tuesday that the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports is holding while the attacks by Iran since the ceasefire was announced are below the threshold of the U.S. restarting major combat operations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Operation Epic Fury is over, but refused to let up on sanctions. Warning, Iran is still facing generational destruction to their economy. Generational destruction to their economy. That phrase from Rubio is not hyperbole. The U.S. naval blockade has been turning commercial ships back from Iranian ports since April 13th. CENTCOM confirmed it has redirected at least 49 commercial vessels away from Iranian port access. Iran's oil revenue, the financial engine of the entire IRGC military machine, has been cut to a fraction of its pre-war levels. And every day the blockade continues. The economic pressure compounds in ways that the regime's golden palaces cannot insulate ordinary Iranians from forever. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the U.S. would put a new draft resolution before the United Nations Security Council to defend freedom of navigation in the waterway.